Hi, welcome everybody to our webinar, Sustainable Smart Cities. Let me also share my screen so you can see what I see. So today is a great event. I'm really looking forward, really excited about the event today and what we have planned with all the fantastic speakers. When we started to think about this event and we started to think about sustainable smart cities, we honestly had difficulties to choose from all the exciting topics that make up a sustainable smart city. And we thought, why not use that basically and create an event that doesn't focus on one specific area of sustainable smart cities, but that covers all the different aspects that we basically see when we walk through our cities or when we consider what we want our cities to look like in the future. So today's set of speakers is actually very diverse, very different from their backgrounds, from their experience, but also from the topics that they will be talking about. We will be talking about the built environment, the construction side. We will be talking about traffic. We will be talking about carbon removal in the context of a smart city. We will hear about plastics and the plastics full circle. How do we make sure that plastic circulates? And then we will hear about what about the community? What about the ecosystem? How do we build a vibrant, active ecosystem around that? And in the beginning, Max will then talk a little bit about what's the trends that we see today and in the future. But before we go there, let me maybe say a couple of words about Taival. Who are we? And why are we organizing this event? We are a young strategy advisory company. And we have identified circular economy, data, digital as some of the strategic game changers of our time that will change fundamentally how companies will work, how individuals will consume, how investors will invest. And we will basically see all of these changes happening both on an operational level, but also on a strategic level. And that is why we have developed a concept called StratOps that integrates strategy development and operations to drive topics like these with our customers. And that's basically the background why we're here today. We want to communicate, we want to discuss, we want to meet people that are working in these spaces to expand our ecosystem and also to jointly work on these topics that will actually move the world going forward. Before we actually go into the actual sessions of our speakers, there's a couple of small practicalities. Every speaker will have 10 minutes to present, and then there will be 5 minutes of Q&A for each speaker. So what that means is you will have the possibility to ask your questions. There's actually two different functions that you are able to use. One is the chat function, where you can chat about whatever you want. And then there's the Q&A function, and that is reserved for questions that you have for the speaker. So you can actually put your questions into the Q&A function. Maybe to test the chat function, I could ask you, where are you joining from? Where are you joining from, and what is the reason you're joining? What is your main interest? If you could take a minute to type in where you're joining from and what your main interest is. I will come back to that then a little bit later in between the presentations. It's always exciting to hear and see where people are coming from and how much we've been able to grow the community around the topic of circularity, sustainability, and in this context, smart cities. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Max. He's a foresight analyst manager at Futures Platform. Futures Platform is a digital foresight solution that provides companies basically with the possibility to understand what future trends are and how these trends will basically be influencing their companies, their customers, and their broader operating environment. And Max will today be talking, giving us a high-level view of the largest trends of sustainable smart cities today, but also what will happen in the future. Max, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. Very happy to be here, and I'll start by sharing my screen, and then I'll start. Okay. So my name is Max Tukki. I'm from Futures Platform. I'm the Foresight Analysis Manager, and I hope you are all in best of health. And I'm very happy to be here to talk a little bit about the high-level view on the trends and future prospects of smart and sustainable cities and what is driving that, or what is driving their development. I'm from Futures Platform. We are creating and managing a digital tool that will help organizations with their foresight needs when they are preparing and anticipating the future changes and trying to influence them. So, as I said, this will be a little bit more from the high level. We are looking at things that are both global or more centered in some specific countries, but they are all relevant for our topic today. Just a couple of words about the way in which the Futures Platform and I approach this thing. We're using foresight and foresight methodology. We are identifying change drivers and trends that will affect the future and that are relevant for our customers and for all those we hope who are using our product. We're aiming for a holistic view covering all different topic areas from economy to social factors. The trends today are from two of our radars. We use radars to map out the future trends and phenomena. The closer you are to center, the closer they are to us now. The further away you are, the further in the future the trends will start to affect us. So let's get down to it. So I've divided this very short presentation into two parts, one concerning sustainability and one concerning smart cities. That is just for the sake of clarity, because that's a good way to divide the issues we're going to discuss. So sustainability. As you all know, sustainability is a very hot topic at the moment for very obvious reasons. We're having problems with our ecosystems, with our climate, and there are numerous environmental factors that are driving the need towards more sustainable solutions. We will have problems, and we are already experiencing problems with clean, potable water. The world population is growing in many places, although it will stabilize in the coming decades, is expected. But nevertheless, these are all things that are forcing us to consider and implement and come up with sustainable solutions. And these are forces that no country can really ignore. There are also social drivers. Social drivers here are, for instance, that people are more and more aware of the need for sustainability. People are experiencing anxiety about the future of our climate, the future of our ecosystem, the future of the nature in general around us. This is leading to tightening ethical criteria that people are learning to demand that the products they are using or services they are consuming are sustainably produced. Of course, this is now very much a thing in the global West, but it is suspected that this will be a more of a phenomenon also and trend in all countries in the coming decades as they grow more prosperous and as the global regulations are set in place, hopefully. And taxation will play a key role here. Environmental taxes on practices that are deemed unsustainable will be increasingly featured first in the Western countries, I believe, and perhaps in China and of course Japan, but they will then proliferate throughout the globe. And here is about smart cities. So these are trends that are affecting the cities in themselves, but also cities in general and what is driving the development of smart cities. Urbanization, this is a global phenomenon, a global trend that has been taking place for a long time now, but will not slow down for the decades to come. So more and more people are packing into the cities. This is something that, of course, in developing countries has reached its peak in many places. But for instance, in Africa, in India, in China, there are people still flocking into the major urban centers. However, the needs are changing within the cities. As we have seen with the pandemic, we don't necessarily need to sit in the office for our work. This means that the ways in which we are using the premises are changing and will change. So to say, walls are not anymore so important, for instance, when it comes to work. Of course, all work cannot be done from home, but the ways in which we use homes and offices and other premises is changing thanks to digitalization. Data, in here it is represented by the card rising value of data, is something that is very much familiar to all of us. We all know about this, but the value of data will rise only more as we are using the smart devices more and more in our everyday lives and incorporating them also to our homes and then increasingly to cities. It helps us to optimize our resource use. It helps us to come up with all kinds of new business models, and also it is possible that entire new ecosystems will rise that encompass the entire cities in which the data is used to optimize, for instance, resource use. And here is something else. These are things that will be important in the future smart cities, but these are not themselves connected to the smartness of the city per se. Hyperlocalization means that things will be more and more produced locally. There are additive manufacturing techniques, for instance, that can be used to produce and manufacture goods within or near the locations where people are located. This is something that is driven and has by, of course, technological change, but also for the need for security. Like people have seen during the COVID pandemic that the global supply chains are not necessarily as secure as we would like them to be. So to some extent, we will perhaps see that some at least more critical goods could be produced closer to those markets or closer to markets consuming them. A circular economy, very, very quickly, this reflects the fact that we need to design our economy more to accommodate the fact that what we consume and how we consume it should be designed in such a way that it doesn't produce waste, that what we use will or can be recycled, and the recycling element and the sustainability element should be there from the get-go. And the last point is the need for culture of preparedness. This means that we need to inbuild resilience and the ability to withstand crises within the city structure from the get-go. The pandemic, of course, has highlighted this, but as the environmental factors become more and more important, this will be of rising importance in the coming decades. And this should be taken into consideration when designing the future cities. Thank you very much. This was a very brief look on the trends and significant changes facing the cities and sustainability in the years to come. I think we have now a little moment for questions. Am I right, Michael?
Yes, absolutely. Perfect. Thanks, Max. As a reminder, you can actually put your questions into the Q&A box. There was one question, if the presentations will be shared. Yes, we normally try to share the presentations afterwards. You don't need to take screenshots or write down everything. Max, while we're waiting for questions from the audience, you mentioned preparedness, and that actually requires a lot of change also on an individual level. How do you see all of these trends basically leading towards that? How do you see the change in all of us basically happening with the help of the trends you mentioned, but also some of the other trends you've basically been looking at?
Well, preparedness, you mean like the resilience angle?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, that's something like resilience is, of course, first of all, it's psychological, that we can withstand the crisis, but it's also physical in the sense that we are aware of the potential of the crisis to emerge, but also that we will take the precautions to prepare for them. And this is something that is, of course, very much state-driven. But in the United States, for instance, they have understood that the local communities are central in this, and they are trying to support them in creating the culture for resilience, for preparedness. And it is something that needs to be improved a lot, because like it is very clear that we will be facing challenges in the coming years, I think. And but on individual level, it means pretty much that to be aware and to prepare the best one can for such things that could happen. What this means in practice is like, of course, the classic is to keep food there in your cupboard. But other than that, I think it's more happening on a state level. Yeah. Okay, we have
yeah, so now the questions are coming in. There's one question from Robert. How does hyper-localization stand alongside global supply chains? I've just been to my local shop wearing a Chinese face mask.
Yeah, this is an excellent question. I will give a very brief. This would require a very long answer, but I will give a very brief one. Like we have now understood that global supply chains are vulnerable. And this is something that has been known for anyone who actually studies the subject matter, of course. But now I think it would be a good time for each of the major economic areas, North America, Europe, and Southeast Asia, to consider what should be the minimum things to produce within the region to ensure the survivability of the technological society. If something happens and we cannot ship goods. But we are coming up with technologies that could help with that, like the additive manufacturing, the fourth industrial revolution in general.
Cool, thanks. And unfortunately, I think we cannot answer all the answers. You can answer them afterwards, also in writing in the Q&A, Max. But there's one question: what do you think about the 15-minute city? Is it feasible, and would it be implemented within the next 10 years?
I must say that I'm not familiar with the concept of 15-minute city, I'm afraid.
So Bobisha, maybe you can clarify that, and then Max can basically get back to you on that offline. Mm-hmm. And then there was the question about the current progress and challenges in the circular economy. Do you have anything that you could basically iterate on that specific topic, how circularity, and there was an earlier question, will cities basically bring circularity, or will bring circularity smart cities? What is the influence there?
Yeah, well, I will answer very, very quickly. And here are, I think there should be other presenters who are actually talking more about circularity, so they are much more capable of answering this question. But I will give my 2 cents on this. And it is that I think, especially relating to the progress and challenges of circularity, is mainly the fact concerning money and political interest. Like if we come up or if we can come up with the funds and the political will to implement it, that's the first thing. Like technologically speaking, I think we can proceed, but on a very high level view, I would say it's about money and politics very much. But yeah, that's my very short take on this.
Perfect. Thanks, Max. As Max has shared his email, you have his contact details. He will definitely also answer the questions in the Q&A.
Absolutely.
So thanks a lot, Max. We're moving on.
Thank you. Pleasure.
It's great to see from where we actually have people in today's webinar. We have people from Germany, Finland, UK, Nigeria, actually New Mexico, and I understand it's 6 a.m. there, so good morning. India, China, Denmark, Poland. So I think we have had these events earlier, and we normally had them as in person, either in Berlin or in Finland, where our main locations are as Taival. And if there is a silver lining about this whole pandemic, then I think it is that it brings the global community closer together around topics like sustainable smart cities, circularity, sustainability, and hopefully that will actually bring forward the topic as a whole. So we will have a chance to actually discuss solutions and co-create solutions for a smarter, sustainable, circular world. As we move forward, I would like to ask Nohman to the stage. He's a digital construction lead at Balfour Beatty with 12 years experience in the industry, and he has worked in multiple larger and bigger projects. And believes that CE and digital is basically the solution for a long-term sustainable success, which is something I also personally believe in, that exactly the combination of digital technology and the focus on circularity, sustainability will actually create a breakthrough if we're not already there today. And Nohman will be talking about the role of digital ecosystems in circular economy and the changes that are required to move towards a sustainable business operating model. Nohman, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Can I just confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Nohman Awan. I work for Balfour Beatty as a digital construction lead. So today I will be talking about digital circular economy applications in the construction industry. Obviously, I work in the construction industry. I'm going to relate the circular economy with construction. So that's my key focus for the presentation. Yeah, so the areas which I'm going to cover today is basically just a brief intro about the difference between linear and circular economy, just as a background context. And then I will be talking about the digital circular economy and the ecosystems, and then that will lead me to customer-centric sustainability. And then finally, what changes are required for a sustainable business operating model. So yeah, so linear economy. So just as a kind of example, so you would see there is an intake, and then there is a process, and then there is a waste at the end. But the problem there is you have problem with your resources, infinite resources. That's the assumption. So if that's what the problem is with this linear economy model. So connecting with the construction industries, that's where the construction project stages are there. Construction project stages are there: design, build, operate, and then demolish. So that's the general typical model in the construction industry. So yeah, so if I take it to the next on the linear economy side, so circular economy. Circular economy, the focus is around designing out waste and the pollution. That's the main goal, and then reuse the resources and the material as much as possible. So this diagram basically shows you circular economy in a nutshell. So, but in the construction stage, in the construction project, so you have the design stage, construction stage, and the operation stage, and then you have demolition and recycle. So this whole circular economy is very much the principles are applicable to the construction industry as well when we talk about the construction project. So there are 7 pillars in a circular economy. So these pillars, basically, if you look at, so they are the focus is around the material, energy, and the resources, biodiversity, human, society, and culture. I think as Max was talking about this as well, and then human well-being, and then you have human activities within your economy. But in a nutshell, if you see all of these 7 pillars, they are focusing on the efficient use of the resources. So what this means, so this is there's a value shift from your previous linear economy. In a linear economy, the focus is on the human need, and then you would focus on that. So, but I will talk about more about what is a value shift later on. So digital circular economy, what is that? So very recently we have seen the big shift in the data in the 21st century because of the fourth industrial revolution, the technological change. So the data is growing every day. So that is what is the main driver in the cities at the moment, and is affecting significantly on the economical activities. So circular economy is basically a system-based approach. So if you look at the cycles, design, production, use, and then reuse and the recycle, all these stages, we already have a technology out there which is looking at the design, production, consumption, reuse, repair, manufacturing, recycling, and overall waste management. There are so many different pockets of activities happening, but what circular economy, what circular economy does is basically applies a system-based approach and connect everything together. That's what, in a nutshell, that's what circular economy is. But how this is applied in the construction, so every construction site has got multiple resources, multiple materials, multiple assets throughout a project. I just showed one example picture. I know it's difficult to read every single writing, but the concept is there. So one building contains a lot of resources, materials, energy, and all sort of a different services being provided in a facility. If we connect all these assets together, if we connect all these materials and resources together, and then so on, if we connect across multiple different buildings together, then that's where you have huge amount of kind of a big power. And then that's where I personally believe the circular economy principles can be applied in that way. So from a digital ecosystem point of view, what sort of things which we need is the products and services. So you need to have stakeholders exchanging the product or services. Then out of that transaction, you should be driving a value out by exchanging the product or the services. And then there's the contractual dynamics is currently are there, but from an ecosystem point of view, those contractual kind of dynamics can be changed, considering the terms and conditions or the end user license agreement when we're using the digital systems. Then you would have to consider some sort of operational, what sort of a touch points you have and how you're going to interact with the ecosystem. So this is how you would generally create an ecosystem, and then there is a key thing in the ecosystem is the data. So you have to have the data into an ecosystem. So if I connect back with the previous example, when the assets, the facility within the facilities, if we connect them all together, there's a facility owners, the facility users, and at the end of the life cycle, you would say, okay, that material is going to be used by somebody. So you have multiple stakeholders engaging, interacting with an ecosystem. That's where the ecosystem is really, really useful in a construction industry. If I just give one example of an ecosystem, Airbnb, if you look at on the left-hand side, the primary stakeholders are, Airbnb started with the primary stakeholders are the homeowners, the room owners, or the room sharers. That's on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, you see the private travelers, business travelers. All those people, they will make the bookings, they will make the payment using the Airbnb. That's one of the simple ecosystem. That's where they have kind of initially started. Then on the right-hand side, that's where you say gradually it increase, that ecosystem is extended, where you have multiple other services providers interacted with the system, like photographers and the cleaners and so on and so forth. You have multiple other services providers kind of extended that ecosystem. So if I look at the now customer-centric sustainability, so very recent bibliometric analysis onto the research papers. This was a bit of an eye-opening for me as well. And so the organizations are focusing more on having a more customer-focused approach. And the clients are also asking for green and sustainable organizations. So this is getting very more trend now in the research papers, but on the practical examples, so this is also happening out on the ground as well. But, oops, sorry. if I just go back, yeah. So in this analysis, you would see that there's the first stage. In the first stage, you will have the customer centricity. Then you have the sustainable development. You can look at the colors and in the diagram how this research has been happening in the past few years. So, but this is how the trend is evolving towards the customer centricity and sustainable development. The customer-centric approach is a bit of a shift. I'm just going to quick whiz through from this. So the customer, you're not focusing on the product, you're focusing on the customer, and you are trying to achieve customer satisfaction best. But for that, you have to understand the customer's motivation. You have to understand the customer's attention, what customers really like, what sort of a time scales is important for the customer, and what sort of a connections the customer has, and at the same time, what's the budget for the customers in order to achieve your customer satisfaction or improve customer experience better. You have to understand your customer more. And now if I connect back with those circular economy pillars, and I've gone through with those pillars earlier. So now I just wanted to talk about what is the shift. Sorry, my slide kind of animation didn't really work out as per planned. But anyway, so you can see that the value shift is what I wanted to say is a value shift is changed from serving human needs, which was the pretty much industrialization's objective. Now the shift is happening towards maximizing human well-being. But now if I bring the sustainability element to it as well, so it's maximizing human well-being within planetary means. So you need to be aware of your planet as well. And that leads me towards the sustainability. Sustainability pillars, 3 pillars: society, economic, and environment. And in the center, hardcore, that's where the sustainability is. That sustainability means using natural resources to meet today's and tomorrow's need. And that's what I would say digital circular economy is basically going to provide, is to harness that objective and be able let us achieve that objective. So new economic system, circular economy, that is looking at human needs and then within planetary means, and that is that's where we are maximizing human well-being in a nutshell, and that is the value shift because in the circular economy. Circular economy, as you can see here in this chart, so there are so many aspects to a circular economy. It's not just sustainability, it's not just human need, but the objective, the key benefits out of the circular economy is the environmental, business, and the social, and then obviously the driver is the sustainability and the human well-being. So fifth industrial revolution has been, in the fifth industrial revolution, there has been discussions around the inclusivity and the purpose, and that is the purpose of the fifth industrial revolution now and which is supporting the circular economy. Business operating models. So just as an example, just wanted to demonstrate in a kind of a big picture. So what is the operating model? You have to have your company strategy and how you and your execution. So how you're going to deliver what you are saying, what you will deliver to your customers. And so the operating model is in between. That's your bridge. That's the key thing. So in that operating model, is to having more customer-focused approach, and you're driving all the change based around the customers. So digital circular economy require what sort of a change? So you have to put your customer experience at the heart of your operating model. That's the main thing, and at the same time you have to embed your digital thinking upfront, and then have an interactive approach to your operating model delivery. So you have to bring all the dynamics together. That's my take in summary. So thank you very much for that. So now question answer.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. There was a short 10-second interruption in your presentation, but I think that was fine. There apparently was some network problem there.
Yeah, probably a network problem at my end.
But that was only 10 seconds. So I think we got most of your presentation. Thanks a lot. Really interesting view. And the questions start rolling in already. So the first question, and that was a question I also had myself. There's a lot of talk around the BIM model in the construction industry, in the build industry. But will that provide enough information for a digital ecosystem, or do we need to think broader than that, about the digital twin, maybe about a building passport that basically goes through the life cycle of a building? How do you see that? How do you see the availability of data in that context?
Yeah. So definitely BIM is a good starting point. So BIM definitely allows us to visualize and create the virtual facility. So once we have the virtual facility, and that's where you can build on top of your additional requirements. So BIM definitely is a basic foundation block for that. And then what we are literally extending now is the connectivity, is the digital twin, as you mentioned. So digital twin allows us to connect multiple different data sources together. And that's where the ecosystems kind of extend. And so we are extending that connectivity, and that's the focus. And I think in my view, this journey is growing, and I see the CE, the circular economy, is really supporting the whole drive, I think, to take that conversations forward.
And maybe related to that, have you seen example business models in the construction industry that supports a full circle building? And related to that, what do you see around the material passports at BB, but also in general in the industry?
Yeah, so the material passport, I think, so the one challenge which I have seen, I used to work for Crillion before, and where in Crillion we used to build and operate the building for a number of years as well. So having that business model to support the full need where you are creating a physical facility, and then you're maintaining the facility. But that maintaining the facility for 30 years, we have to prepare for that. The technology is going to change, so we have to prepare for that. But now when we are I am working for different clients, and every client needs a different. That's where our focus is changing. That's what I was saying earlier. The customer focus is so important, but at the same time we need to change our approach as well, how we deliver at the end. So it's not we are building a more and more relationship with our clients, so we can take this kind of a journey not just for ourselves but for our clients as well.
Yeah, sounds good. And there's a question about how do we involve civil society? How do we involve customers into the shift into circular economy? We talked about the building industry naturally, and buildings having a very long life cycle. Yeah. In many cases, and many people living in a building throughout the life cycle. How do you see that? How can we involve more people into this, and the civil society and the customers?
Yeah, so so if I just give you a real example, so I work in the healthcare sector, and then I also work in the, let's say, education sector. So the projects which I have worked on, so on the healthcare sector, so we are kind of not just delivering the facility, but we are looking into how do we engage with our patients. So digital healthcare, that's the strategy which we are trying to drive. So the facility is going to be delivered, but how the end user of the facility is going to interact. And then in the universities cases, so that's where the students are going to interact with the facility, how they're going to benefit from the facility. If we're looking at the student accommodations, and the student accommodation, somebody is going to use that facility for a number of period of time, and then what are the touch points for them? And so we are also not just looking at the delivering the facility, but what sort of a digital infrastructure, the technology which goes in the building. So we have to empower like extend the Wi-Fi network coverage, and those kind of simple little things. So when we are procuring for the technology, so we are including all those elements as well, which kind of allows the future of the technological change and the end user interactions with the facility.
Cool, thank you. Maybe a last question, and then I would also ask you to have a look at the Q&A and maybe answer the rest of the question in writing then.
Sure.
In the chat. There's one question about what are you doing at BB around guidelines for deconstruction of existing buildings, as well as around designing and building new buildings for flexibility, long life, eventually deconstruction, exactly these topics. What are the approaches you're using at BB around these?
Yeah, so we had a number of different clients, and in the past I had these kind of conversations with the clients. So a lot of clients are like, yes, great, you can deliver something new facility with this technology, but what do I do with the existing facility? So yes, so there are certain initiatives which we are taking with the clients, and is to digitize, basically create the information which we need for the existing facility. So there are some small steps, initiative step before we start let's say a refurb project or extension on an existing facility. We are taking some exercises before we actually start the construction work. So we are digitizing the facility, and that's number one. And then secondly, the information which we need to extend and benefit from that data at the end. So it's taking not taking advantage, but basically is to satisfying the customer's need and future-proofing their facility as well.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Nohman. There's still a lot of other questions. If you could, after your presentation now, have a look at those questions and answer them in the Q&A section, sure. That would be perfect. Thanks a lot for the great presentation.
No problem. Thank you.
Let's move on. There was a question in the chat I saw about a recording, and I think about the slides I already mentioned. So after the meeting, as the presenters naturally allow, we will share the recording and the slides for all registered participants. So you can then have a look at the slides and also be in touch with the speakers directly afterwards. I once again skimmed through the chat, and it's great to see so many different people from so many different backgrounds, and you all have different reasons to be here. But I think at the end of the day, what brings us all together is that we all want our cities to be more sustainable and smarter going forward. And I also educated myself on the 15-minute city. So for all of you who haven't read the chat, so it basically means that all important services are within 15-minute walking distance from wherever you are in the city. And apparently the city of Paris is planning to do that. I'm wondering how that huge city will accomplish that. Next, I would like to move forward and ask Reko to the stage. Reko is a fellow executive partner and fellow co-founder at Taival. He has a background in Accenture. He's been working for Alco and other companies. And in his time in Taival, he's been working in different projects around sustainable smart cities and circular economy. Today, he will be talking about one of our projects that we've done for the Smart&Clean Foundation around the plastics ecosystem operating and data model. Reko, take it away. The floor is yours. Reko, are you there?
I am here indeed. Thank you very much, Michael.
And lower your camera, we can also see your full head. Nice.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for that. Good stuff and great to be here, and great thought-provoking presentations already earlier. I especially appreciated the fact that there was a mention in the previous presentation about the operating models linking the strategic intent to actual actions. I happen to be a firm believer in operating models and describing them in a meaningful way to drive change in an organization. So that was very, very good to see. Hey, today I have the pleasure to present some of the work that we created together with the Smart&Clean Foundation here in the Helsinki and Finnish capital area. And we'll be talking about the plastics ecosystem operating model and also the data model that we created to basically support the work that they do in that ecosystem. Now, what is this all about? You'll hear soon. But a quick word from me that Michael already kind of presented the main topics about. I am the partner and CTO for Taival Advisor at the moment, also co-founder. 15 years of experience in all kinds of strategic topics and digitalization. My background is basically in electronics, ubiquitous computing, and business management and strategy from the university side. But what I'm really interested in is, you know, this ecosystem cooperation. So how do we create systemic change in business by allowing companies to work together in an ecosystem mode? Datanomics, how to create value out of data that companies have and can share. Enterprise architecture is one of my dear hobbies as well. And when I have time, I also enjoy mountaineering and rock climbing on my free time. Obviously, that has been a little bit on a pause now that we have snow in Finland and due to the COVID situation. But to the topic, Smart&Clean Foundation has been a 5-year kind of step change project here in the Helsinki metropolitan area, where it's kind of a way to create a public-private partnership activity between the city's leading businesses, research institutions, and also the state actors. They have been successfully pushing through these systemic change topics around transportation, energy, construction, and all of that. And one of the main topics that they worked on was the plastics circulation topic, and we've had the pleasure on working on that together with them. And as you can see, it is a fixed term topic. It started in 2016, and it's due to finalize its work and move topics forward from their plate this year. And this presentation is basically a look at one of the topics that they have been working on, the plastic circulation. To give you an idea of what we were working on in this project was to look at a key question of, you know, what are the actual activities to start and maintain an ecosystem that would create kind of a systemic change, maximize the plastic closed loop circulation in the Helsinki, the capital area, while at the same time creating value for the individual participants. And this is very key to the success of this type of ecosystem business model and creating systemic change. You need to look at, you know, how do you start it? How do you maintain it? But especially look at what is the individual value that companies and the participating partners would actually get out of being involved in the ecosystem. Naturally, as it's a public-private partnership type of an environment, it's not just the business case that matters, but it is also the kind of impact that you would look at. And the two topics that we actually addressed in this project were the operating model here as well. So how do you actually deliver value? That was the main question with the operating model. And on the other hand, what milestones would need to be reached and by whom? And that was what we set out to solve. As for the current state, and for those who are involved in the circularity topics, this picture is most likely pretty clear. But just to tell you the highlights, so there is the virgin material production or material coming in from here. It goes to production where we produce plastic products and packaging. Then you look at basically what is then the consumption. Consumers, companies, and public sector are consuming these products And then we have the collection of plastics that either go through the mixed waste or then through the regular plastic specific collection. Then in some cases there is a processing that happens where then the plastic waste is processed to be reused back in the production. And then in some of the cases it's incinerated. And then there are process fallouts where then it is not incinerated, but it might be just lost on the way for landfill, litter, these other reasons. And this was the scope of companies that we were looking at that would need to form an ecosystem that owns the topic of, owns the aim of getting to a certain circulation percentage. And as you can see, it's not something that one company or one organization can do by its own, but it's something that needs a systemic approach. And that was the key dilemma. So what we were looking at was building this type of an ecosystem operating model, high-level picture, where we say that it is not only the ecosystem operation that you need to look at. So how does the actual circulation process work? But you need to actually have an active way of developing new solutions, new services, and maybe even new companies to drive change in the actual operation and to push through innovation. At the same time, you need something to support that innovation and information sharing. You need education. There needs to be awareness building. There needs to be consultants like ours to accelerate the change in the ecosystem and so on. And also to influence public opinion about, for example, plastic circulation. But there needs to be also a channel for the regulatory environment to kick in, the government sector or the cities to actually influence the topics so that it makes sense to circulate plastics. In the current environment, the virgin plastic is quite cheap, for example, so it doesn't necessarily make economic sense to use anything circulated. But if the regulator basically pushes some rules into the game where it becomes more heavy for companies to utilize plastics, then that changes the whole game and makes the ecosystem work more efficiently to reach its objective. And there naturally then needs to be an agreed way of governing this ecosystem. So looking at the stakeholders, making sure that we have the right stakeholders and coordinating them towards the right objective, for example, with joint projects, or then by enforcing agreements on this area. How we did it, we agreed on some design principles for the roadmap and the activities. We said that there needs to be this, start small agenda. We need to get small successes on the way, trying to find the minimum viable way of recycling plastic. So not tackling the whole beast at the same time. We talked about packaging plastics as the smallest unit that we should maybe start with. Then we built a milestone-based roadmap where we said, okay, we will have a couple of milestones per year that we need to reach in order to then have, in the end of the 5 years or in the end of the 10 years, this objective, which in this case was the 50% circulation of plastics in the Finnish capital area in accordance with the EU objectives. And then the one idea was to have this virtuous cycle development. So being able to tell good news from these small experiments will bring more people, hopefully, into the ecosystem, will make everybody recognize that this is a good thing, and then getting more and more efficiency out of the ecosystem work. Then we talked about that there needs to be a separate governance for the ecosystem and way of governing it from the actual actions that the ecosystem takes. And then one of the key things that we agreed on is to try and build a way to share information about, where the plastics are, what are the plastics, how to basically understand at which stages we have bottlenecks, and where to actually push for the public policies or joint activities. And for that reason, as the next step in the project, we actually went to build quite a complex model of the circulation, which builds on different research that has been done in this field, looking at the actual numbers, the kilotons and tons of plastics produced, manufactured, traded, used, collected, processed, and recycled in the Helsinki region and in Finland in general. And this was basically a model that allows then the participating companies in the ecosystem to actually try and model the effects of the project that they propose for the ecosystem to make sure that there is an actual proven way that the idea that they have will have tangible effects on the actual recycling rate. And this is something that works dynamically. So we can basically, if you update something here, it pushes you then to update other numbers so that the whole model stays balanced. And this was received quite with some enthusiasm by the steering teams in the area. And how it basically works, it models the circulation by having these small cells with inputs and outputs, which models kind of an activity. For example, here, a collection. And then there are different flows coming in there and different flows going out. And the balance of input and output pretty much is assumed to stays the same, which then allows us to model things. So if input changes, then the output needs to also balance out. And this was a way of making sure that the investments are basically based on right topics. And what it also allowed us to do is to track the year-on-year change and growth of the plastic volumes and the objective that we set out to do. Now, to close off what the current state is, as you heard, the Smart&Clean Foundation is basically on its last year. And there are handover activities of responsibilities going on to a new orchestrator at the moment. The core team of companies is operative and engaged with the objectives and the governance of the ecosystem. There is effective information exchange going on between these companies, and various projects are ongoing under the plastics ecosystem umbrella. The ecosystem itself is still finding its form, so it's not in the current state as described here, but it is basically going to that direction. And the tool is being utilized at the moment to model various scenarios and various items of work to basically build the project potential. So this is something that is real and ongoing at the moment. But with that, I welcome your comments and questions.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Reko. There is actually one question. I think it's a very interesting question. How do you make sure that there's room for innovation, for scaling of future innovations in this space, while you have a lot of giants, basically, who are taking care of the waste streams, of the reuse locally, and some of them actually being government organizations or half public organizations?
That's a good question. I guess the main thing that we talked about all the time is two things: understanding what is the motivation that is driving those companies to even be part of this. One part is the that there is quite a lot of value at the moment in being able to broadcast to everyone that we are actually innovative in this space. And at the same time, when you're involved with this type of endeavor and have agreed to be tied to its objectives, then there is some power in that to be pushed to co-innovate and share resources. So that would be my answer, but it is a problematic field, and especially in the field of co-innovation, it needs to be governed quite closely.
Absolutely. And another question is how to estimate plastics in foreign e-commerce. And I know this was a topic we have been thinking about and basically discussing a lot during the project. What are your thoughts on that? How do you guess that? What is the wild guesstimate when it comes to foreign e-commerce and that impact on the plastic cycle?
Yeah, that was one of the headaches on actually estimating the volumes. And I guess the way we had a few holes in the estimation, as you, Michael, well know. The way that we tackled is the cell approach. So once you have those cells in place and you understand what flows into one cell, and then there are gaps in between, so that there are mismatches between the cells, you can actually start then estimating and making assumptions that the missing part needs to be this, because there is no other way that it can be explained. However, it is a rather shaky one. So how we approach it in some cases is to look at it both top down and bottom up, trying to understand it from both dimensions and see if they match.
Yeah. Cool. Also for you, there's a lot of questions in the Q&A section. So maybe one final question, and then we unfortunately need to move on. If you could take a moment after you leave the stage to answer all the questions in the Q&A. Final question, could you elaborate a bit on challenges in building this collaborative ecosystem? For example, tensions between different actors and how you overcame those, or how we're currently working to overcome them, I guess, is the question, as the ecosystem still is being built as we speak.
Yeah, I guess the main thing is so there are definite problems with that, especially as many of the companies have their own ecosystems themselves. So I guess the main thing is to get them involved and really to understand that this is something that we need to do together. The 50% objective, for example, is something that comes from legislation. It needs to be reached, or there are some consequences for all the participants. So being laser focused on that one theme and the one thing that is the combining force for us to work together, plus then looking at that there are just these simple small things that you need to do in order to be involved and be in the ecosystem. So make it easy for the companies to be part of it. Then that would be my answer at this point.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Reko. If you could jump right into the Q&A and provide your answers, that would be great.
Happy to do that.
Let's move on. I'm so excited to see that in the chat there's a really active discussion ongoing around all the different topics that we've been talking about. And our next speaker is actually right in the middle of that discussion around traffic in the smart city context. So Janne is the Chief Ecosystem and Technology Officer of FinTraffic. And FinTraffic might not be specifically to our guests from Nigeria and New Mexico and other places around the world, might not be that well known, but FinTraffic's task is actually to ensure safe, smooth, and environmentally friendly movement on the Finnish roads, railways, and air. So it's basically an organization that orchestrates the traffic all around Finland. And Janne will be talking about new methods in the ecosystem cooperation model that basically bring together the different players in traffic, transportation, mobility and help them work together in relation also to the question we heard, how do you make the different ecosystem players work together? Looking forward, Janne, to your presentation. Welcome on stage.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm sharing my screen. I hope that you can see my screen now.
Yes, we see your screen. Perfect.
This way. All right. So good afternoon from my side. My name is Janne Lautana. I'm working for Fintraffic, which is controlling and managing traffic on the land, in the air, and at sea. We are having kind of similar traffic-related challenges in Finland, very similar to other countries also. So obviously, digitalization is providing opportunities, but also challenges. We have the urbanization, aging population in Finland. Climate change obviously is a big topic, but also especially due to the COVID-19 situation, both the public transport companies, but also cities don't have as much money as they used to have. And also, for example, sharing economies is changing quite a bit of the mobility. Our goal in Finland with Fintraffic is to ensure that we have the safest, smoothest, and most environmentally friendly traffic in the world, and that's what we are striving for. And we have a number of methods how we do that. So obviously we have traditional traffic management, traffic control mechanism in all modes of traffic, but also there's the other mechanism. We are the central point in Finland for aggregating and publishing traffic-related information from all modes of traffic, both related to the kind of situational awareness of traffic, also related to public transport, and also logistic-related information. And of course, the goals here are low emissions, more public transport, which in return kind of lowers the emissions too. We would like to achieve cost reductions for everybody, publics, the normal citizens, but also companies. Minimizing accidents is obviously our goal, and also increase revenue and export potential in new intelligent transport related services, and of course increase in general Finland's competitiveness is our goal. Finland is a large country. There's plenty of information available from different modes of transport. We are, for example, ourselves controlling more than 500,000 trains a year. We have 280,000 controlled flights per year. There's a huge amount of traffic going on the roads. We have 30,000 international vessel calls a year. So obviously there's huge amount of information that's being generated in our system, in traffic management and control systems, but also there are external companies, both public and private organizations, which are generating data. Today, what we are looking when we are looking at what do we have today, there's actually a pretty good situation in Finland, starting from open data services. So we are basically publishing all the relevant parts of our data, what we are handling, and our infrastructure kind of sister company, Väylävirasto, is handling through open APIs. Digitraffic today provides more than 10 million API calls per day. And we are providing data to companies like Google or HERE or Garmin and those folks that utilize those data in the navigators, for example. We are also providing fairly detailed information about the situational awareness of Finnish traffic in all modes of traffic. And traffic situation, and I will be showing one example shortly, basically provides information, nationwide information about traffic incidents, coming and going flights, coming and going vessels in ports, what is the average speed on different types of roads, etc. Or train departures, what is the exact time of arrival and departure times on train station for all the train stations in Finland. Feedback channel is essential in Finland. We have pretty, our winters are harsh. There's loads of things happening to payment, for example. And if you encounter an issue with, for example, with payment, we do have solution for gathering that feedback. We are using workflow to provide that data to the respective maintenance partner who is actually executing those maintenance activities and reporting back that, okay, now it's handled. All of this information is centralized, can be seen by all different parties, and you can see how things are moving forward, whether it has been taken into action, whether the action has been completed, etc., etc. Also, for example, the public transport, essential if you want to generate multimodal traffic chains, mobility as a service type of services for all citizens in Finland. It's essential that you have the nationwide routes, timetables, etc., available for all the respective parties, and you have to have the capability of doing route planning, for example, and that's what we are providing through DigiTransit service and providing that to all the parties. So just one example, and this is a snapshot that I took a few minutes ago. So for example, we have quite a bit of snow in Finland today. The traffic situation is not that good. There's quite a bit of slippery roads, and you can actually see these yellow parts here mean that the roads are pretty slippery. There are a few places here where it's actually pretty okay, and therefore it's green. But these black lines here mark winter maintenance activities that can have been executed. And basically, if you click any of these, you can see more detailed information on what type of activities was, who executed that, when it was started, when it was completed, etc., etc. And of course, for example, here you can see a number of other information types that can be seen, whether it's road traffic incident, road works, weight limitation. We have several hundred road condition cameras that can be used to see what type of situation is on that particular route. Does it look slippery? Is there snow on the road, whatnot? And for example, commuter trains, so kind of are these trains on schedule or are they delayed, and so on and so forth. And so number of things that help you to understand what is the traffic situation. You can use that information to avoid congestion, avoid traffic incidents or whatnot in all modes of traffic. But basically, that's not enough. We need to have an ecosystem succeed. We need to have both public and private parties involved in traffic ecosystem. And of course, traffic digitalization is moving forward, but we need to have common vision goals and collaboration in Finland to achieve those goals. And that's essential. But also, we need to have digital infrastructure for traffic to exchange this information, using it efficiently. We need to have proper master data. We need to have proper quality data being available of, for example, the situation awareness or timetables for public transport, or, for example, logistic related information. And also what we are creating together with the parties in the Finnish traffic space is a kind of digital playbook, the rules, regulations, ways of working, how do we do collaboration, how do we ensure that we are fair, transparent, and so on and so forth, that we can really create kind of high quality, intelligent traffic services for Finland. That of course requires a pretty comprehensive operating model, which need to be modular. We need to have clear interfaces, clear services this is the high level picture of that of that model that we are creating together with other parties. We have a fairly regulated environment, so we need to have political environment taken into account. We need to have the governance executed properly, and of course the different types of ecosystem value chains in all modes of traffic. And there's kind of two sides of the story. There's the ecosystem development side, both for people transport and logistics, and there are different aspects in the ecosystem development which basically provide new services and products for the ecosystem operations part. And so we are very much looking at providing services for the ecosystem operation, which we're doing actually today. So providing the open data for all the parties interested on the situational awareness side. But of course, the operation side gives development needs for the ecosystem development side. So it's a kind of full cycle here that we are looking for. And of course, there's the data and technical platform part that needs to be taken into account when we do the ecosystem development. So you might ask, okay, how does this help? How does this contribute to smart cities? Well, there are a number of things. So when we reduce congestion, when we need, help people to choose public transport and other shared mobility services, there's obviously a number of environmental benefits. We help the mass operators and other public transport operators to provide better services, and that will increase the public transport and shared mobility services usage. So we are really helping out the different parties in the public transport space. The better situation awareness brings a lot of values. There's increase in safety, avoiding congestions, thus kind of bringing less pollutions. There's better analysis and prediction that can be used for optimizing things. There's plenty of value that we bring into the infrastructure and investment optimization when you know the actual number of and volume of traffic that can be used for investment optimization. Of course, you can do plenty of automation based on the real-time data and prediction of data. There can be loads and loads of new business models that can be created with the help of this data, with the help of the analysis of the data, and with the help of prediction that can be done. And of course, ultimately, what this provides is way better user experiences for the smart city citizens through seamless services, through new types of services and other things that the intelligent traffic data and traffic services can bring to them. If you're interested to hear more, happy to provide more information. You can follow me in LinkedIn or Twitter. And here's also my email address should you want to drop me an email. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Janne. There are already some questions, but just as a reminder, so if you have any questions to Janne, you can type them into the Q&A tab. So one question is an interesting one. Have you done a comparison actually between the efficiency gains and the increased energy consumption from basically using this or collecting and processing this amount of data?
Not explicitly, but I think it's pretty obvious that what we have seen with the help of this environment, with the help of this data, you can actually kind of really avoid congestions, and there are plenty of parties who are using that. So we are basically talking very small fraction of increase in, for example, electricity consumption here compared to the benefits that we can get, both in the decrease of pollution, both in the smoothness of traffic, whether that's a kind of other type of benefits that can be achieved with this one.
Cool, perfect. There's one other question. How are traffic data interoperability issues handled across the public-private interface? And is it mandated by the regulator, or is there flexibility to support other competing standards?
Yes, that's a very, very good question. And the situation is mixed. Somewhere in some areas, there's a very good standardization in place. If you take, for example, public transport data, Google's GTFS standard and DATEX standards are pretty much kind of the industry standards in place. But then there are other areas, for example, electric vehicle information is not standardized at all. So you really have to have good collaboration with different parties to ensure that the standards are there. There's EU-wide standardization going on, especially in the so-called ITS directive, but it will take some time before it really is in place and in use by all the parties. And of course, this is a kind of continuous standardization work that's required as new services emerge.
And I saw you also shared some information about the data interface and some links in the chat. So if anyone is interested to read more about it, there's also some links available in the chat. One interesting question. On slide 4, someone was missing the cyclists and the pedestrians.
Yes, true. It's really is one of our goals also to increase cycling and walking. Of course, the easiest way to reduce the kind of pollution from traffic is not to use any polluting vehicle. So walking and cycling obviously is one of the best ways to do that.
Cool, perfect. Thanks a lot, Janne. Some questions also for you in the QA. So if you could visit the QA and answer the questions there. Thank you, Janne.
Thank you very much.
Good, moving on. And as always, there's also room in the chat naturally to continue the discussion on different topics with our panelists and ask further questions. Great, moving forward. So next, I'm happy to welcome Marianne from Puro Earth. Puro Earth is a carbon removal marketplace, basically focused on basically removing carbon and leading to net negativity in the economy. And she will be talking about verified net negative technologies that can remove carbon at an industrial scale. And how that is basically viewed, I guess is the word, in the context of smart cities. Marianne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for having me here. I just tried to share my screen and got very bad voice quality, so let me try again, and if that is still the case, then I will have to change the network. So
or I can actually also share the presentation if you want. We can now see your screen.
But let's okay, good, and this is a better quality, so maybe the problem will solve itself.
Perfect. We like these problems that solve themselves.
Excellent. So I come from a young startup called Puro Earth, focusing completely on carbon removal credits. Those are digital assets, digital securities related to carbon removal. And I was asked to speak about carbon removal and the opportunities of that in smart cities. And I would like to start by explaining what is carbon removal, and then looking at where is carbon, what are the carbon flows in the city, and is there possibility to influence those so that they would be carbon removing instead of carbon emitting. I want to start by showing Microsoft's emissions. Microsoft has just announced last week that they purchased carbon removals from Puro Earth. And their plan is by 2030 to have reduced their emissions by 50% and have equally much carbon removals. And today they have approximately 10% of carbon removals compared to their emissions. So this is what we mean by net zero, and this is what many corporations are now voluntarily doing to reduce their emissions and then remove the rest. The carbon removal has 3 steps. It has the capture phase of capturing the carbon dioxide or carbon, stabilization phase, converting it to a stable immobile form, and then the final deposit, the storage. And these 3 steps together form the carbon removal. We are not talking about what nature does. In nature, the vegetation and oceans absorb carbon all the time without human action. We are talking about things that require human action. That's why they are all also called anthropogenic, just like the emissions caused by humans, or technology-based or engineered carbon removals. So where does the carbon or carbon dioxide come from? When we are talking about carbon removal, it needs to come directly from the atmosphere. It's called the direct air capture. And here is a picture of Climeworks, who is one of the pioneers in that technology. Or it can come through biomass indirectly, starting from the atmosphere and then through plants being captured in the biomass itself. Where it can't come from is the fossil CO2. So the path from fossil storages, then burning the fuel and capturing it back, that is not, the climate impact there is not carbon removing. At best, it can be carbon neutral. So where does the captured either carbon dioxide or biomass end up in? There usually is a conversion or a processing phase where it is stabilized into something. And then there is the terminology made out of air, different things, or made out of biomass. And carbon removal requires the storage to be intended to be permanent or long-term. So we are looking for long-term storages, long-term usage. Consumables and very short-term things like fuels, like food, they are not carbon removals because they don't have the storage phase. The most discussed storage is the geological storage, that the carbon dioxide gas or then biomass in liquid form is put underground in deep geological cavities called CCS, carbon capture and storage. But there are other ways. You can also have stabilized it in a non-decaying, non-decomposing format and put it back to the nature. And then, of course, all products, all built environment and the infrastructure in there can also host these materials made out of air or made out of biomass, so that the storage is there for long term and has long durability. And anything that is being done, a life cycle assessment is needed. So you have to calculate the carbon balance, how much was emitted, how much carbon did you need to emit to make the whole 3 steps, and how much did you capture. And these 3 steps together, then if everything is right, it is carbon net negative. The balance is on the removal side, and comparing to the finances that you are making profit, you're earning more than you are spending. It's the same here with carbon. Looking at cities, where does carbon move in the cities? Eating, transport, like Janne just explained, living, heating, and then the buildings and infrastructure. All of these have carbon stocks and carbon material flows. On the eating and traffic and living side, they are more dynamic carbon, so the short-lived consumed or combusted carbon. And in the lower part, that can be more stored carbon in durable products or infrastructure and landscaping. And I was thinking of the tools that the cities have to influence these carbon flows. So they probably can do things with traffic policies or parking rules. There is city planning, which decides already in the design phase a lot of things. And then procurement in the cities, by the cities, is a massive source of influence or tool for influencing. And the city carbon metabolism has actually been studied in a rather recent study. 19 cities were compared. The upper part, the blue arrows here, are the carbon in the products coming into a city and exiting the city, where the red arrows below are the energy related carbon. Energy had to be used for services and products that the city consumes. There is a link if you are interested in the carbon metabolism of global cities. There were quite interesting differences between, for example, Hong Kong and Bangkok. Yes, so I think that cities can do a lot. They could influence the carbon flows, turn them from emitting to removing. There are examples of bioasphalt, rather new innovation. Of course, wooden buildings, all infrastructure and building using biomass and storing it for long term. Biochar, City of Stockholm has been a pioneer in showing how to use it in making the health of city trees and greeneries better. An international airport was made with an innovative way of not using the traditional cement, but using a carbon absorbing substance instead. And then Stockholm City and many others combine carbon capture and storage in the traditional CCS form, BECCS, with the bioenergy plant. And waste to energy is also often a city activity, and that can also be combined to removing carbon. So my question actually is to all of you that what is your touch point to these carbon flows in different roles, either in the planning phase or in the execution and operation phase? And can you turn the carbon flows from emitting to removing? Can you, next time you touch a carbon flow in a city, stop and think and re-evaluate if it can be a carbon removing flow instead? Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Marianne. Again, reminder, your questions in the Q&A tab, so we can pick them up from there. Maybe, Marianne, your video basically is off. I'm not sure if that's because of the network difficulties.
That was maybe more an accident.
Okay. Maybe a question from my side then, while we're waiting for questions from the audience. It always takes 1 or 2 minutes. You said in the end that we should think, if we engineer new things or if we build new things, how can we turn things from a carbon emitter to a net neutral carbon provider?
Even more so, net neutral is net zero, but net negative, so that you actually remove more than you emit.
Yes. I mean, what are from your experience, and this might be not an easy question to answer, but what are the key things you would like us to think about if we build a building, like we heard in the beginning of the presentation, or if we think about traffic, building a new tramway or these type of things? What are the key things you see need to be done to move to a net neutral or maybe even net negative smart city going forward? And who are the people, maybe?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think that it should be everybody. This carbon balance thinking, carbon mathematics should be common knowledge, become much more common knowledge, understanding that in addition to high carbon and low carbon, there is also carbon net negative. So there is actually things happening below zero, and you can remove more carbon than you emit. So everybody should think about it. I think the basics, I would leave room for innovation. This is a new industry. So think about the basics. Where does the carbon come from? If it is directly from the air or through biomass, then can you do it in a way that you, or if it's not, could you replace it with something that comes from air or biomass? And then make it so energy efficiently that the emissions don't outweigh the embodied carbon in the material itself. So I think that the innovations are there. It's a young industry. The focus is turning towards thinking in that way. And quite often the decisions are made already in the early phase, in the design or the policy phase. So we should be really thinking of it early on.
Yeah. And I think it's back to what we heard from Janne as well as from Reko, as well as I think from Nohman. It's all about the ecosystem, isn't it? It's the different players, it's the regulators, it's us as consumers, it's companies, it's everyone basically coming up with that mindset shift that you're referring to. There is a question if biochar is actually available for retail.
Yes, there are biochar producers starting their operations. Some of them are already rather big or available, so definitely. Puro Earth is not directly selling the biochar. We sell the attribute of carbon sequestration that it offers. That was actually also something that Microsoft was interested in, because they are very long term. The permanence or the durability is very long. But in our webpage, you can actually see, if you go to the Buy Now section, Puro Earth and Buy Now, you can see the suppliers where you can also ask for the physical biochar and not the carbon removal credits.
Cool. There's one question, if there are any advances in the heating, ventilation, and air condition field with regards to basically reduction in carbon footprint in that context, as air condition and ventilation systems naturally are a contributor, let's put it that way, in a negative way.
Yeah, it's what I've heard and followed is that they could capture from the inside indoor air the carbon dioxide, but the recent developments is that they would make the product that carbon dioxide would be used for would be a consumable, so either a fuel or something else that is back in the atmosphere very quickly. So the current plans, as I know of them, would be a capture and then recycling, but not really removal in the sense of the long-term storage.
Maybe the final question then also for you, there's questions in the Q&A, so if you could just swing by there and answer the still open question. The final question, could you please provide your view on the maturity activity levels between the major economies and geographies? Are there differences in the geographies and how they're addressing this?
We work and actually also deliver to Microsoft European and Australian projects, and then work also very much in US. So I don't actually see a difference in the level of US, Europe, and Australia. All are very active and good there. So it's a global climate and global problem. I think we are achieving things in parallel.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Marianne, for the great presentation. We're moving on. Thank you. So next, we have Dina, founder of Circular Berlin. He has been working in different circular economy projects, supports the development of the circular economy agenda and implementation in Germany through different means like research, community building, and practical programs and other things. And she will basically be talking about how to build up and managing a circular ecosystem, as she has been doing that in Berlin. And what is a circular city altogether? Dina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. I also start sharing my screen. Yes, here we go.
Perfect.
First of all, thanks a lot for a lot of inspiring information from previous speakers. I also noted a lot of points, and I'm very happy that a lot of ideas and a lot of projects which were presented, a lot of overlapping with what we are also striving for. So I will present today our organization, Circular Berlin. As a difference from others, we are a non-for-profit association, which is also hyper-local work, what we are providing and doing. So we try to engage Berlin and help Berlin towards a circular city, envision it as resilient, citizen-oriented region. And what we do as an NGO, we try to enhance the city with open source methods. So everything what we develop, everything what we in projects where we participate, we try to do it as open source as possible. And also what we strive, I think that the change starts locally. And it's important to, maybe to share the knowledge and replicate them. But basically, if you really want to make a change, you need to start there where you are and not necessarily start to solving all global problems. And as by our name, Circular Berlin, you can imagine that what we do all activities here in Berlin locally. And examples and thoughts which I will present today will mainly reflect on the work what we are trying to move us from theory to practice about circular economy. And how we work, we basically operate through three main pillars. It's a knowledge building. And until now, we were very active among, I call it 3.5 sectors. It's a built environment, food and biomass, textile and fashion, and all around topic of secondary material and products use. Then we also engage a local community here. Mainly it's innovators and also other association or non-profit organization to stimulate circular economy as a topic and to see how we can collaborate on that. And the third pillar for us is education, because we do think that actually to make a transition, you need to share the knowledge and we need to do it as fast as possible, but we don't occupy that for only ourselves. So, and why city and why topic of circular city for us? Because we embrace the topic of circular city from perspective that cities is actually point of impact. Impact for change, because nowadays cities are actually increasing the use of Earth's limited resources by the point that they are becoming a powerhouse of economic and population growth. We already heard that from Max. And also what we observed that currently the role of the city, especially here in the Western world, that it's shifting towards center of consumption rather than center of production. But what it also leaves as outcome that it becomes a massive generator of waste and pollution. So the question, if we look on the current way how economy work, take, make, use, dispose, so how we can apply the topic of circular economy towards such areas as a city, because that's where we can actually manage the unsustainable consumption, which is happening there. I will not go into details what is circular economy, because I think Nohman could highlight it quite well on different topics as well. But we think a circular economy can provide the alternative to how we can manage our resources locally. And I would also highlight, because it's not only about efficient resource management, but also about sufficient resource management. And what we have done in Berlin, so we also wanted to see what means for Berlin to become a circular city. And we envision Berlin in this case as a resilient and citizen-oriented region. We embrace the topic of also social component in this case, and where the resources are sourced locally as possible to do it, and their value is maintained as long as possible in continuous loops. That's what actually embraced by the topic of circular economy. So we're not only talking about materials in this case, but actually the value of that materials, because it's not about only circulating something which is already, let's say, crap, but it's also about circulating something which presumes the value in it. And embracing also the topic of circular economy, it means that the way we design the processes in the city is also should be designed in that way that waste and pollution will not be part of it. However, what is also very important when we talk about circular city, and for us as Circular Berlin organization, is also to understand what is the role of people in this case, because we shouldn't forget why city and who is living in the city and who should actually be the beneficial of the whole positive impact toward that. And in this case, also Nohman, he presented the complexity of the building, but I find look on the topic of city, it's even more complex in this case, because there are so many different layers, so many different sectors coming together, so many different polluting and contributing factors. And this is something which is making the topic of circularity in the city really systemic approach, because you cannot address only one sector, it will immediately feed back to something else. And we also think that in order to approach it, actually the topic of urban metabolism, what Mariana also briefly mentioned on the level of carbon metabolism, is actually essential concept. And that's what we also try to follow. However, it's also quite, I would say until now, it's quite theoretical concept to do that. But the approach here is also, we need to understand what materials, what is coming into the city as an organism, and in points of materials or in the points of energy and water flows, and what's coming out. And as soon as we understand these flows, then we can actually think about specific strategies for the city to redesign them and localize that flows. There are also several levels of information and data which is required for creating and understanding this flow. So it's not only about material components of that, but it's also about, for example, a role of utilities and services in the structure of the city, but also about a role of policy frameworks. And I would say this is currently, I mean, I would be also critical on that, because the understanding of the urban metabolism topic, it's still partly theoretical approach. So we also had a look on Berlin flows in this case. And what we discovered immediately, that there is a significant gap in data, actually, to really to strive for that. So there is some information available about waste flows. I mean, actually, it's quite advanced what is available, but it's not so specific as circular economy expert would wish. There is definitely energy balance available, but there is, for example, completely gap of information on inflow of materiality, what's coming into the city. And this is something which I wish also more actors will look in the future, not only now in this case, we are trying to do that, but there is, I hope there will be more interest in this field. So we try to break down approach, how you can actually to make a transition to a circular city. And as Max also briefly mentioned that there is actually a lot of policy engagement required, and so there is. It's not only possible to do from bottom-up view, but there has to be also there is also need for political will. I would say from our side, we are an organization which is active on bottom-up activities and trying to close the gap from the perspective of different actors. But there is definitely a lot of need also to engage policymakers and decision makers from the city side. But what we think is important is first, you definitely need to understand local stakeholders and local boundaries of your system. So where's the city coming from? For example, if I look at the sector of food for Berlin, you cannot only look on Berlin as it is. You really need to look at also on the Brandenburg, which is a neighboring region where most agricultural production can also take place. And this is actually sector per sector could be different. Then you need to understand indeed the flows, as I mentioned before, and measure them. You also need, what I think is really important, and sometimes in my opinion, it's a missing fact in smart city discussion. So it's not only about digitalization, but it's more the question, what's for we need to do that, and what are the local needs, and where are the local gaps. And I would say that for a circular economy approach on the city level is the same objective should be in place. So we should actually understand where circular solutions are relevant and where they may be, maybe there's other solutions more relevant than circular approach. And then fourth step, you definitely should, as soon as you make this evaluation, you need to go into creation of collaboration with local clusters. Mainly because, this is where the ecosystem building approach starts. That's because that's where you can understand how mostly efficiently and sufficiently you can manage that flows. And on that level, maybe a brief explanation what we've done from the project perspective with our own efforts. So we started indeed with understanding local stakeholders and ecosystem. And on our website, you can see already the map, which is consisted now of more than 170 different initiatives in Berlin. By initiatives, I want to highlight it's not only about businesses. I think everyone who wants to contribute to the objective of circular economy is a valuable actor. So we also map academic and NGO project, academia or NGO projects, or also research areas which trying to contribute with the knowledge to that. And we started primarily with sectors which I mentioned, which make sense, which for us was initially the most essential. And the idea was, with the creation of this ecosystem, is to see on the ecosystem value chain or circular economy value chain. For example, if I look at the construction sector, I need to understand what's happening from the here locally in Berlin, from material production till end of life with materials after building is demolished. And if we have these actors here locally in Berlin who can cover these different steps across the circular value chain. Why it was important to evaluate in such a way these actors, because I think it's not necessarily important if one particular company or one particular actor is actually circular. What is important to see how they can find right partners in place to provide circular services where the city can also benefit. That's how we started with building our ecosystem, and we still manage it. As I said, we have more than 170 different initiatives, and it's growing very fast, which is amazing. And also what I think Reko mentioned in his presentation, what we also identified quite fast, what is important is, however, to manage it and sustain it is literally to find a common or to find one value for which could be brought for them. So for us, it's really important to connect them, to be as this organization which provides a connection for their needs, and also to provide visibility for these actors. Because what we observed in the past, city quite often asked, who is actually the circular economy actors? Who is actually doing something? And apparently there was a need to showcase that there are a lot of innovation already happening. Another activity that I also wanted to highlight, it's one project which we're doing in the city center in Berlin. We're also part of a project consortium. We don't do it alone, but it's focusing heavily on the topic of material reuse and components reuse. And the need for that project developed because Berlin has a very, very livable ecosystem of upcycling and local recycling actors. And what happened in the area of reuse in Berlin for different type of sectors, there is definitely there is no visibility for these flows in statistics, because usually the products what they are working, it's considered already as a waste according to statistical approach. However, they actually capable to create new products out of that or reuse them for with their current purpose. And second point was that there is no standardized approach how they actually can source the secondhand materials. So it's basically somebody knows someone and search for materials available, and if there is no availability in place, then they can wait maybe for next month, or they can do something different. And with this type of project, we wanted to analyze with our partners specific flows in Berlin, and it's coming for textile flows, metal and wood. Because this is main material flows which are needed for creative area, creative economy in Berlin, which is also quite active in terms of using these flows. And what we try to understand, what we try to develop together with, or we try and still, the project's still ongoing, to develop an inventory tool where it's possible to document such materials and to standardize the sourcing of them. And I think it's very important to see, because for circular economy, we quite often look into futuristic way of understanding digitalization. But if we look on the reality and try actually to see on the current flows, how we can literally circulate the windows which maybe were taken away from the building several days ago, but actually the windows are still durable and possible to reuse, how we can map such products and materials into the, because they're still usable, into the future product. And this is, I think, the biggest gap, which we also try to cover with this specific project. And maybe last one, because this was the most, the closest for us in working together with the municipalities. So we worked together with one district in Berlin, in Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg, to develop the concept on zero waste. And I mentioned this term because today we didn't talk about that at all. Berlin is actually approaching the topic of zero waste much more than the topic of circular economy. It's also maybe predefined by the logical German terminology about this, the notion of circular economy, but the district approached us and wanted to embrace the topic of zero waste in the public spaces. And I think it's also very interesting because public spaces is it's something where we actually see waste, but nobody knows how to eliminate that. And what for us learnings on this project was that if you work together with municipalities, you actually still need to, there is still high need to bring the innovation in their understanding. So one of the outcome for this project was for us, besides the roadmap which we developed together with the district, is basically to bring the understanding that it's not about waste, it's about where the causes of this waste. And that's where we need basically to act upon. Maybe my final statement to say that I think the outcome of the circular city approach is something which impacts local economy significantly, and the most added value from that is basically that's what helps to predefine the jobs and what needed in this local development. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Dina. Really interesting projects that you've been working in. Unfortunately, we did run out of time, but I'm sure people can reach you under these details if they have questions. There's also no questions currently. Wait a second, there's one question. Regarding the measurement of the flows, how are we ensuring the quality accuracy of the data across the large number of ongoing projects?
It's a very good question. I think, however, it comes as a second problem. First problem would be trying to collect the data on the flows. And then, because I would say for Berlin, where I'm more available or where I'm familiar, there is really not so much information available. And after ensuring what is available, there is still a lot of assumption based for this data. And this is just basically the checking how valid these assumptions are not.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Dina. Really interesting projects. Unfortunately, we need to come to a close here as we're out of time. Thanks, Dina. And I'm sure people will be in touch with you if they have specific questions. Before we close, there's a couple of things I still want to mention. We have a digitally circular community on LinkedIn, which is basically intended to continue the discussion from this event and make sure that we stay in the dialogue and exchange all these success stories and these great ideas that we have been exposed here from both the built environment as well as the carbon removal, the traffic, and all the other great ideas that we've been hearing. So please join us on LinkedIn if you're interested to continue the discussion there. And then there's two things. We have a white paper on strategic dimension of circularity, as well as around exactly the topic of sustainable smart cities on our webpage. So if you go to taival.com stories, you will find the text there. Also, we have been developing a circular economy assessment, maturity model and assessment, and we're currently looking for organizations and partners that would actually be interested to beta test the tool together with us. So if you're interested in that, please visit the webpage and reach out to us. If you're interested in future events, please make sure you follow Taival on LinkedIn. We will announce future events there. And please feel free to also connect to me on LinkedIn or drop me an email at michaelhanf@taival.com. Leaves me with thanking all of our speakers. Great event. I personally really enjoyed the event. We had 130 participants today, and I think you've all been giving very interesting presentations and very interesting inspiration, I hope, to all of us to basically co-create for a sustainable, smart world going forward. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining to all of our participants, and looking forward to see you again, hopefully in person, but maybe also in one of our future webinars. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.